Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thread to Threshold. I'm your host, Phil Rice. Today, on this 20th of August, 2020, it's currently 10:30 a.m. in the morning here in New Zealand, down the bottom of the planet, or is it the top of the planet? Well, that depends on your perspective, I guess. I just want to say a big thank you to all of the watchers, listeners, viewers, people who have subscribed, liked, commented on the videos. I'm very grateful for the feedback, the encouragement, and I also want to say a big thank you to the people who have made donations to the podcast. It is very welcome and much appreciated. And if you would like to, if you feel encouraged to make a contribution in the form of, say, a donation, I've put the details right here. It's a PayPal way you can pay. Otherwise, in the show description, I'll also put a bank account number as well for those that would rather use that. But yeah, so, all encouragement and support is appreciated. And thank you so much. And so what I wanted to start off today's session with is just a short meditation, just to get us into the frame of mind here. And so, thank you to all those watching presently. So yeah, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you just to follow my lead on this if you like. You don't have to. It's only going to take a couple of minutes. Bring your hands together like this. Move your elbows away from your body, just under your nose. This is called Gasho. This is a Reiki meditation. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to take 3 breaths with me, in through the nose, out through the nose. Breathing in. Deep breaths down to your tummy, feeling your rib cage open up, and release. Breathing in. Holding it, and relax. Last one, breathing in. And out. Cool. And I thought I'd bring forward another little piece of Reiki wisdom, and that is what's called or known as the 4th precept. And it starts off like this. Each one of the precepts in Reiki starts off with this: just for today. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, right now in this present moment, in this day, just for today. Just feel the load that drops off you when you think about that. Just for today, just for today. And the precept follows: just for today, be true to yourself and be true to your way. Say it again. Just for today, be true to yourself and true to your way. That's one translation of that particular Reiki precept. All right, let's get down to the meat and potatoes, says the vegan. All right, today, guys, as you may have recognized, I have the very awesome Brian T. Collins, straight from Canada, on the other side of the planet, kind of, not really. It's kind of there. Anyway, so without further ado, I'd like to bring Brian on. And today we're having a very cool discussion about standing stones. And I also just want to say that I'll be taking, if you've got any questions, throw them in the comments. I'll be bringing up the questions for Brian at the end of the hour, so at about 11:30 New Zealand time. So put your questions in the comments and just put anything you like in there. And if you've got something cool to add, I might even put it up on the screen here. But yeah, without further ado, here's Mr. Brian T. Collins. G'day, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Phil? Thanks for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, for those of you who aren't aware who Brian is, you can go to previous podcasts and check out. There's a bit of an introduction on there, and also you can go to Brian's website, which is right here, briantcollins.com. You can find out more about Brian, what he's about, what he's into. And today we're going to focus on a certain area of interest that has me. I'm fascinated by this. So this is almost like a follow-up from the interview with Stephen and Evan Strong in regards to sacred sites, and ancient standing stones, or even just standing stones. Because I can imagine that, there's some sites are not necessarily that ancient. They may be more modern, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're they're not, well, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to let Brian explain this, but Brian, I've got an opening question for you. Is that what got
Sure.
you interested in ancient sacred sites and standing stones? Please go for it.
Well, first off, I was born in Scotland, and I had the privilege of parents that wanted to travel and stuff like that. And my father. This is a little bit of history about myself. It's really interesting. My father was completely he's an engineer. So his philosophy was that if you can't measure it with a measuring tape, it doesn't exist. So to grow up with that dichotomy in a family, but then travel to ancient sites and esoteric places was really something as a contrast, right? Because I was growing up and what was really interesting, and I've explained this before, was when I was very young, I was around 5 years old, approximately. I can't remember the exact date, but I was hit by a car, struck, and I got a brain injury from that. And it made me extremely sensitive to the environment. And it affected me, and I used to get all these ear infections and stuff like that. And I was very sensitive to frequency. And it's really interesting that, my parents would take me to places in Europe and Spain and France, all these, esoteric places. And I had a strange kind of Uncle Bob who he took me up to the stones at the north of Scotland. And he said, I'll always remember this. He said, don't forget this, Brian, because this is your origins. And he was showing me a cross that was, a lot older. It was the Celtic cross. It was a lot older than Christianity. He was going into all this stuff. So I won't bore the audience with all the detail of the stuff. But specifically, what got me interested in standing stone sites was because I was very sensitive to frequency, and so I had a kind of I was able to intuitively connect to the land in a very special way. And I've kind of lived an interesting life because I really firmly believe in, scientific methods, but I don't follow the doctrines of the secular way that science and materialism that, like my father was, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So I grew up in a house in Glasgow that was haunted. And I saw a ghost. Yeah, I saw a ghost when I was really young, and I described this ghost to a T, apparently to someone who had died in that house previous. And so I was introduced to paranormal phenomenon very early, and so that got me just kind of really interested in learning, the science of the unseen and stuff. And so I used to go to these sites. And I remember I returned because I went to Canada in 1980 with my family. And I returned to Scotland in 1987, and I took a bicycle for 2 months. And I cycled all over Scotland and all up around the west coast of Scotland, all to the north. I visited all kinds of standing stone sites and places. And I was in a place, I was going up to climb a mountain in the northwest called Sullivan Mountain. And so I was by this fishing village there. It was called Loch Inver. And while I was sitting on top of this hill with this stone, bunch of knockdown stones and a stone kind of an apex, I experienced a kind of a standing wave phenomenon. And that's what got me interested. And ever since that, I dedicated my whole life into studying sound at ancient sites and the water aquifers under ancient sites. And I started seeing correlations of, some of these standing stones, how they would draw water and stuff. And we'll get into things because I'm not one of these armchair archaeologists that like to say, hey, look, here's what I think they did in the past, and here's what I believe they correlated. I don't care about that. I care about, because I'm an innovator. So I care about okay, what does that look like that we could maybe mimic today? And so I started researching, different things. And And anyway, I've seen things that science can't explain, and I've seen a lot of things that I'll never go public with, just because the deep nature of who's running this world. but also there's also deep magical mysteries that I believe we can all experience. And one thing I can say from these standing stones is there really is a kind of a spiritual upgrade when you go to these places. I mean, what's really lost today is that the generations today, they don't care. I mean, I dealt with seeing stones in Ireland that were being vandalized and stuff, and it's sad that you've got these like stones, these places that are like 3,000 years old, 4,000 years old. The millennials are just destroying them, and it just goes to show you that the erosion of all of our past or ancient past. And I'll get into a little bit more of that, because I really believe that the crisis that we're in today, where we're seeing so much going on in the loss of freedoms, is because we've lost our origins. We've lost our actual connections. And so one thing I've been doing for years is visiting ancient sites and setting intention into the land. Because when we're not honoring these ancient places, we're not honoring the ancient ancestors, they're forgotten. So, I'm being all about like going to these ancient places, and I've done this for years. I've traveled to ancient stone circles to clean up some of the earlier atrocities that were done through time. And I'll explain time and all of that stuff, because time can be very malleable around these places. So I'll just kind of leave it there for now.
Yeah, cool. Wow, what a great intro. Thanks for that. Yeah, when we're talking about when you were saying about reconnecting, we've lost the ways, so to speak, and we're sort of scattered around the planet now. Out of maybe where our original origins were, but I don't know how that plays into the effect of like how that affects us. But what I will say is that studying the various mystery school traditions, and in my case as a Reiki teacher and practitioner, understanding the core philosophy, it is about remembering. We've kind of sort of strayed from the garden, or we've sort of strayed from really important connectivity with nature, and that's why I think we are experiencing for a large part what we are, because if we really look at how nature works, we can see that we're kind of not we're almost transgressing against the natural ways of things. And I'm not talking about the law of the jungle here. I mean, humans have a higher capacity for reason and conception and so on. And so I feel that with this level of sentience that we've got comes a responsibility. But anyway, so I was just adding on to what you were saying is, like these places, it's almost funny because we're kind of getting an upgrade to go back to our original selves or our true selves, which is almost like a bit of a contradiction in terms. But I personally haven't been to a lot of sites, but I have been to some, and I wished at the time I was a little more sensitive to things, because I was walking away going, I couldn't overtly feel like I was experiencing some kind of change. But I have to say, especially with the Reiki work and the work that I do with my one-on-one clients and things like that, sometimes change takes a little bit of time depending on where your awareness is at. So, if you wanted to share something on, say, stones being or sacred sites essentially being a form of initiation for some people.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think I just in the last couple of hours, I kind of took stuff from an old presentation and just went and threw it all into a kind of a keynote thing. And I'm not going to this isn't planned. I'm just taking some stuff. But I think it's important to understand what's happened, because in large, we all hear the New Age term, we're all made of energy and we're all one and all this stuff. And then you've got the science material like poo-pooing New Agers and whatever, but then they'll say in their own way, oh, well, everything has units of measure of energy and consciousness and stuff. But the end of the day is that is what happens is when we focus our energy on something, it our constructive brain constructs something. So our constructive brain would construct this as, I know this is a glass because, you know, I've been taught in life that that's a glass. So therefore, when space and time unfold and the particle waves, when I look at it, it constructs it as a glass. Right? That's kind of complicated for a lot of people, but there's a lot that involving quantum physics that you know, essentially a wave becomes a particle when you look at it, so to speak. So some of these places, and a lot of these places, they were put on specific places that would harness the Earth's natural energies. I'm going to use the word energy. I could start going into, you know, things like telluric currents and stuff, but if I start using nomenclature or words that's not out in the public, you know, so let's just, for the sake of communication, I'm going to use the more broader term energy. Right? So these energies, there's electromagnetic energies, magnetic energies that can be read by scientific instruments that are vector. But there's also energies that are the subtle fields that can't be measured by science, you know, instruments, and it's because there's a foundation flaw in the way how things are measured. Those things are measured calibrated off the arbitrary unit of measurement of the SI unit of a second. Right. So anyway, so basically, is what that wouldn't mean anything to anyone unless you have you know, comprehension of what I'm saying. Is think of it as like, it's like take an orange, and then what we're given is a thin, paper thin slice of that orange that's two-dimensional. And that's kind of the science that we have. The science is really just the art of approximation. So under the scientific method, there's rigid parameters. The reason we have the materialistic scientific method in the first place is because everybody's brain is making different constructions in the mind. And in order for them to have a conduit of communication, they created materialism. Right? But what's happened is in the last few hundred years, this materialism has been risen to a religion, a dogma in science. So it's materialism has become a secular, you know, religion unto itself. So therefore, if it can't be like my old man, if you can't measure it with a measuring tape, it doesn't exist. But nonetheless, it's these subtle energies exist. Of course, they exist. You know, much earlier on, I was studying these fields, and so, like I said, there's a lot that has to do with these fields and how our consciousness interacts along these fields. So the common terminology that people would think about energies, earth energies, they would call it ley lines. But however, a ley line was just a track. It was like an old Roman road or whatever. It was like where you follow the lay of the land, right? The curvature of the land. So so people know the term ley lines, right? Just like people know the term Reiki. Reiki's a well known, but as you know, there's a lot more to Reiki than doing this, right?
Yeah.
Right. So same kind of thing applies. What we're dealing with is subtle fields, and it's essentially how cosmic rays interact with the Earth, and then they interact with the neutrinos or firing, because they go through everything, and then all of those things interact in the oceans and creates this thing called telluric currents. And the ancients knew how to harness these currents. In fact, what they would do is they deliberately create standing stone networks that would harness, collect, and then transmit these currents way inland from the sea. And so there is a type of a hidden science, and that hidden science was occulted, for quite some time. And there's reasons for that, because essentially the world fell into cataclysm. And after that happened, a certain bunch of people rose up to seize power. And we're suffering today because of the descendants of those bunch. So there's a lot of information that was covered over. So when we go through school and we're given a curriculum, and then we're challenged with information from field research that doesn't fit the narrative, then what usually happens is cognitive dissonance happens, and then it's either usually challenged or let go of. Now, there's many times throughout history and throughout archaeology of archaeologists finding things that don't fit the narrative, and so they come in and destroy the evidence. And I've seen that. I've seen UNESCO going into, and that's what they do. Right? They go in and they're basically like how like the CIA they outsource killer contractors. They call it wet work, right? To go in and then clean it, right? So right. So that's what UNESCO is. They're the cleanup crew, cleaning up history, and then redo these temples, make all laid out for you, and then they give you the little narrative that you listen to on your little wireless as you're walking through paying your fee, because it's a business, right? UNESCO's a holdings company. It's a holdings company.
And I'll just add to that too, for listeners who are interested in this particular type of conversation, Stephen and Evan Strong from a previous interview didn't go into this so much, but they have themselves been working with the Indigenous peoples of Australia because, for one reason, because, governments are seeking to basically bulldoze and wipe out these ancient sacred sites with, with some pretty very interesting, petroglyphs and glyphs and monuments and things that, shouldn't really be there. So, this is not happening in any particular one place. This is happening right across the planet because, why do you think it is that, things fall so easily from our memory, like all the evidence of the giants, the skeletons that, that just nobody talks about, the red-headed giants that they find around the planet, and why do you think it is it so easily falls out of the public sort of memory? Is it just that we're not bombarded with that information enough, and this includes ancient sites in that too, I think.
Well, I mean, see, here's the thing is usually it's best to, when you're doing these kind of things, is there's a broad, wide open audience. And by the way, you're always going to get those who will come in to try to stop this, because that's what's been happening is there's been, shadow banning and censorship on those who are actually showing forensically that the actual archaeological past does not fit the narrative that's been sold to as lock, stock, and barrel through the system, right? Which only always selectively, benefits a few at the top, right? So specifically, why is because, it's trauma, right? So basically, I'll show a couple of slides.
Sure, hang on. I'll just, I might just try this. No, that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll just keep it there for now, right? So here's a picture of a sun gate that I took in South Devon, and this place is near Tavistock. These stones, and there's a complex, and it's I recognize this as it's a water temple complex, and so there's water that runs for almost a mile in an S-curve down through the landscape with all these stones. It's a beautiful place. And I noticed that that on the equinox that the sun passes through this gate and it lines it a certain way. So this first shot that I took is a sun gate. Now I'm mixing some of my own images with just also because I just threw this together just quickly in the last few hours. Just grabbed some stuff off the internet, some free stuff. And so anyway, so I just want to show that there was an ancient way of being able to harness this subtle energy. And a lot of these ancient sites would set up conduits of how to relay this energy, because there's a kind of a charge differential between the ground, the stone, and the atmosphere. And when you get a material in stone that's paramagnetic, that has a reaction, slight reaction to the charge variance of water, which is dielectric, right? So a lot of these stones, like you said, is the narrative. They'll never admit this, ever. They just will not ever go into this. So this is why it's disparaged as pseudoscience, because you can actually measure, stuff around this. I've tried to take pictures at some sites, and then the pictures get overexposed, or you see like orbs all over. And I've got amazing shots. Like I haven't not going to share in this one, but maybe privately on another call. But yeah, there are these subtle fields, and so the ancient standing stones came first, of being able to capture and harness these energies, and then later on in history, that advanced into more advanced buildings. This, I've been down here on the equinox. This is at Chichen Itza, and this is. It's an amazing. I took a time lapse video of this serpent going down the stairs from the sun shadow. I was there like a couple of equinoxes ago, 3 I think, or 4. Time's flying. And anyway, so what's interesting about this is many pyramids are aligned to true north. This one's actually aligned for the equinox. So this is definitely an equinox, temple. And what's important about the equinox, and this was something that the authors Christopher Knight and Robert Loomis really revealed in their book Uriel's Machine, was at the latitude, at a certain latitude on the equinox, the shadows line up at only one latitude of calibration. And that latitude of calibration runs through Stonehenge. And so it's just really interesting. And so anyway, there's a lot of these ancient sites that later on, like the pyramids, were emulating some of the ancient standing stone sites. Our oldest site to date that's been found, and there's a lot of information on this, Göbekli Tepe. Now this is an interesting site because only 1/50th of this site's been uncovered, and this is
huge.
Yeah,
huge,
absolutely huge. And so it's completely, this is the elephant in the room. This is the smoking gun that's just destroying the narrative of archaeological history because it's much older. And so what's essentially happened is, a lot of these places were places of where they were kind of like batteries or capacitors that would hold this subtle telluric field energy. And, some of them may know of my work. I've been kind of a little bit of a pioneer behind working stuff with 432 hertz over the years. And I was definitely one of the first, I think I was the first to ever actually research this in great detail at ancient sites around the world, using specific frequencies to see how they would actually react in, these telluric fields. And I amassed a great deal of research on this over the years. And so basically going back is we had a cataclysm. And we've had several cataclysms. The big one was around 13,000 years ago or so. And what that event did was that literally put complete trauma into the entire psyche of the human race. And the survivors, then wanted to actually find out if they could predict, these cataclysms. So in large, the need to actually make calendars and accurately chart the heavens. It wasn't just what the archaeological narrative is we need to know when to plant seeds. I mean, that's not that hard to figure out. But what's harder to figure out is when cataclysms come. And so a large number of these places were set up to do such, And this slide here I took, the bottom pictures are stones, and there's that stream, by the way, that runs, like I was saying, down that ancient sun gate site. What I noticed is there's something where water was pooling, usually always pulling around stones, and it has nothing to do with cattle or sheep wearing a trough around it. Some people easily dismiss. And so anyway, a lot of these stones, they seem to appear to have no specific pattern, but there is a pattern in terms of, you start to see this kind of shape in quite a few of them from around the world. And I kind of, liken it to almost kind of like terminals on a battery. And many of these places I've put my hands on these stones, and then it's like I could feel like whatever's going on. And again, it's your own nervous system in your constructive mind, picking stuff up. But we're always getting sensory input from the environment, and it's really largely how we actually supposed to interact with the environment. Because today, in modern world, we're so disconnected and fractured with all the electronics and all kinds of stuff. And so getting your nervous system into a sensitive state, you can actually start to feel the subtle energy fields moving through you. And what's also interesting was so some of these ancient places, they started making specific shapes in order to predict time and accurately start to predict calendars. And we came up essentially with the 360 degree, in a circle, largely for that. So prior, they were measuring, these things prior to 715 BC. Many of the calendars were 360 days. It was really around between 740 BC and 715 BC. Worldwide, the entire world started changing their calendars to 365.24 days. So that's just really interesting. So the whole thing was about being able to really actually hold court or hold time over, being able to predict these. And there's a lot that it's way too much to go into. It's way too complicated to go into this in just one specific talk. But a lot of it had to do with, these shapes that we find, right, that works into prime number fields. And we see, the Knights Templar were using these symbols and stuff. And then what they were doing is that they were using these specific shapes in order to actually predict time. And this shape here is very important. And I used to have a lot of pictures, and unfortunately, a lot of my research was destroyed in the UK. I won't go into that. But specifically, I had lots of pictures, and this is the only one I can just get from online. But there's a lot more, and I just wanted to say that in Scandinavian culture, and I've been to a few stone circles over there. There was quite a few of these, and so this used to be an ancient way of being able to actually, with the rays of light at a certain angle, it would be used as basically a count in being able to keep time for these cataclysms. Now, what's interesting is under the Vatican, it was Pope Innocent III, but there was some other popes as well, and I can't remember the exact one it was, but they were basically, that there was a standing order to smash, pull down, or crack many of the ancient standing stones. And ancient timekeeping was forbidden by the Roman Curia under the Roman Rota. And so what they did for themselves is they took this esoteric ancient technology for themselves, and they built their own. And so what's happening today is they have this thing known as the sacred, well, the Basilica is this ancient stone war calendar. And what most people don't know, and especially those, researching, a lot of stuff with financial legal stuff, is that the Vatican claims ownership of time itself and registry. And so they have this thing called a Curia conclave, in which that they have somehow suspended time, and this Curia is in conclave in the spiritual realm, and they're made out of the 12 apostles, and that the 12 apostles rule over time, and that while time is suspended, they're bringing their own time under Maritimio, which is fear at the time. Anyways, it's kind of real deep esoteric stuff, but this is how they claim time, because this thing in the center here that you're seeing, this is essentially it's a calendar. So what that does is that funnels. Now think about this: is when we lose our ancient ways, and we lose the connection to ancestors, and we lose the connection to all the ancient deities, and we lose the connection to rites of passage that teach us how to create moral relationships and families and proper communities. When we lose all that, then that means all of that mind force energy in the quantum information fields is now
somewhere.
It's got to go somewhere. Perfect. I'm glad that you said that. Right. It's got to go somewhere. So they smashed all of our origins and got us with amnesia so that we don't connect to our past, so that they can then therefore use these things called collective egregore energies, which is a consensus for localized astral thought form. And then they funnel it into their systems and to create their own stuff. And then they create their, ways of being able to rule over us using our own symbology and our own, past. Right, so right there is you've got a sandstone block that's allegedly the stone of destiny. You've got the Leofau, which is piercing the heart of Tara, which is in Ireland. You've got the black cube of Mecca, where you've got the thousands of people circling it, which inside what's in there is a piece of black meteorite, right? It's a stone, right? So, right. So, I mean, I was doing a series of workshops years ago called the Ancient Stones of Destiny, and it's one of my brands, where I show this about, focused intent energy. And, I used to take people to in workshops to certain stones in Ireland and places, and other places, to actually, show some of these places. So the one at the bottom there, that's the rock dome, or Dome of the Rock, or whatever. Yep. So that, and then that's like, you can't get in there, right? So what is the big deal around a stone? It's just a stone, right? Right. So, well, I didn't catch all your interview the other day with your two guests, but one thing popped right out when he was saying about the energy of the stone, and that's something I've experienced. So basically, this was the whole reason why we're so the way we are, because if we don't know our origins, how can we actually know where we're going for a future? So we've been farmed as a farm animal by these bunch who rose up and took over after the cataclysm, and so we became basically, it's like a puppy mill, right? A human resource down through generation after generation, cradle to grave. And the result is that we're told that we're overpopulated, but it's not. We're actually funneled into work houses called cities. So social engineering. So that even though we're on Earth, it's like this is the farthest away from Earth that you can get. So there was more I wanted to show you, but like that's the whole thing in school. For an example, we're shown that this is what the map looks like. So we take this as our normal worldview, but the actual world shape is more like you see in green. And the reason that map is given to us the way we see it is because it was drawn in favor of the Western world, civilized world that was conquering indigenous peoples. Right? So I mean, the true size of countries, most of them can fit into Africa. Yet on the map, the African continent is tiny. So I'm just quickly using this is that it's about senses, right? Because we think that we're so smart and we can see things, but we can actually only experience 1/10 billionth of the information through the electromagnetic spectrum. So same thing goes with sound, right? People just think sound is just a wave. It's a concussion wave. There's a lot more than that, right? So first off, it travels out. Sound is round. And this talk isn't about sound, but there are key things having to do with ratios.
The topic out though, isn't it?
What?
It's hard to leave out the topic of sound and frequency when we're talking about stones.
Oh, well, yeah, it totally is, because just like sound creates interference patterns. The same things happens in stones with crystals. So again, is what's happened is our orbit. There's certain key pieces of mathematics in terms of our orbit. Now, I'm not talking about hertz here. You see that there's 432 here, and I'm not talking hertz. I'm talking the number 432. By the way, there's a deliberate disparagement, disinformation campaign in the last 10 years that's popped up to stop information about 432 hertz and insert it with false information, basically whack-a-mole it, because there is some interesting correlations to 432 hertz and healing. I won't get into that here, but specifically we want to keep this into where we're keeping the number separate from the hertz, right? We're not talking about 432 hertz. We're talking about measurements. And again, here's where it's going wrong with frequency, is what a time measurement is frequency. So you've got a Hertzian wave, but then you've got the frequency of time, right? So it gets complicated. All right, but nonetheless, it's really interesting, because when you look at those metrics and you start getting into like how some of these places are incorporated. This number is common in ancient sites, the 432 number, and a lot of it has to do with relationships of the ratio of things. So, for example, the Great Pyramid is like 1 to 43,200 is the ratio of the Great Pyramid in relation to the actual Earth.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, that's wicked. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, well, it's amazing. It's amazing that you have all this built in. And then what's really interesting is is when you go in to start looking at things like the Grand Gallery and stuff, all the stuff, it resembles the corpus callosum in the brain. So we can speculate till the cows comes home, but at the bottom of the day is, like, if you think about it, a lot of these places were actually created to enhance these subtle energy fields to get you into an altered state. Right? So let's see what else I have. Oh yeah, I'll talk about this in a sec. So well, actually no, I'll just go through it now, because we'll go into an interactive thing. So this is interesting. This Egyptian statue cartouche. Look at that. Right in the middle, you got tuning forks.
Yeah, right. True that.
Right. So, there's stuff out there, and so a lot of these places were basically designed to enhance or think of it as hotspots where you could kind of go behind the veil and glean information. And what would happen is your own senses, your body senses would enhance. And this is something I really believe in because of my own relationship to pitch and sound ever since I had that accident when I was a boy. Because I can hear the Wi-Fi. I can hear the hiss constantly in Wi-Fi. So my hearing range is slightly different from an impact from, when I was a kid. And so I've always been sensitive to frequency. And I started developing my intuition using sound. So and what's interesting is in some of these places, you get these patterns that, and I'm jumping through a whole bunch of stuff. I'm skipping through stuff as well. So, but the ancients gave us signs. Like, for an example, we know this is the Ankh. But what the Ankh does is it kind of is a representation of the circle of Willis, which is a main artery that actually helps to feed the pineal gland. And so that's the one thing that calcifies out from all the toxic food and water and stuff is this. So it's interesting because even in Greece, in the oracles of Delphi, they would get into these altered states in these stone places. And Nymphalis stones, for example, they're very famous for being, stones that you would, oracle with or see the future. And to a large degree, is like when you are able in such a state and you're able to get into a natural state, you can get insight from stones. And I've gotten amazing insight and downloads at stone places. And what's interesting in some of these stones, these patterns that crisscross, they kind of resemble the rotational patterns that can be measured in the telluric fields. Here's a dear friend of mine, Dr. Corinne Morseg, and she's in Greece. And I said, well, you know what? Can you go look up some stuff when you're over there? She says, yeah, I was reading about the ancient theater of Ouroboros, and it was a sanctuary for healing where people would go to purify themselves, then sleep, and a dream would be given to them, instructions on how to heal. I heard about this from one of her history professors, but it's not something you read much in ancient Greek history. This site was forced to shut down around 4 AD, but I can see its influence on Greek churches. And after you were healed, you go back and give a metal offering in the shape of whatever body part was ill. And they still do that in churches in Greece today, like in Tinos, where healing miracles happen. So she says, I double-checked with our Greek expert, who is the co-director, and says that is correct about the ancient theater site being a healing center. First, you get a ticket to get in. I think it was an animal sacrifice as well. Then you bathed in the purification springs, and then you fasted for 3 days and slept in the dormitory there at the site and had your healing dream. So we've heard of the story of Jacob, who rests his head on a pillar of stone, right? And then, so back to that slide, the coronation stone, that's supposed to be Jacob's stone, but it's not. It's a fake, just like the rest of that empire. Right? So specifically, what's important about this stuff is it starts to actually work with the electrical potential of the body. And this thing that we have in our head is called the sphenoid bone. It's kind of shaped like this,
like a butterfly, like
a butterfly. Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like a battery terminal.
Yes.
So when you play certain sounds, and specifically, this is something that I do with my harmonic integration sessions when I help people move through stress and trauma very quickly, is I've studied for years on how to actually recreate some of the ancient temple ways of singing, and it's very similar. You would know it today as Tuvian chant, where the harmonic overtones. I realized that there was more emphasis on consonances and stuff like that. And I won't get into all that, but what's really interesting is, so when you resonate your skull and your nasal cavity, this bone starts to vibrate. And when bone vibrates, the minute you change the structure in something, the crystalline structure inside, what that does is it starts to actually create a charge, and then that charge has a field that actually can be measured, and this kind of phase conjugate charge, it's responsible for a lot of that, where we feel like our heart, we can feel an expansion happening, and so that sphenoid bone is extremely important for regulating that field, and we're supposed to actually vibrate it quite often, and by the way, low frequency is the key here. Right? Isn't it funny how everything in the public's all inverted, right? So they're throwing it right through the New Age movements and all this, raise your vibration, raise your vibration. Well, raising your vibration causes the oscillation to go down, because also the wavelength gets shorter, right? So lowering your vibration creates a larger oscillation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I kind of wonder if they've got they're kind of, whoops, hang on, that's not the one. They're kind of piling together. Like if anything needs to be raised or increased, it's probably our awareness. And I think that's kind of been correlated with what they call frequency, or raising your vibration. But we've talked about the Geesink study about the different zones of coherence.
Coherence, yeah.
If you raise your vibration just incrementally, it doesn't mean you could be moving into a decoherent zone. You need to actually move into the threshold of the next coherent zone, not just raise your coherent zone a little bit. And I don't know, like, am I kind of connecting with you on this?
Yeah. Like, it's a crying shame. I really wish I'd never actually went to the UK and then met that certain person, and all my research got destroyed, because the book that I had was going to be brilliant, and I lost years worth of research and notes on that stuff, and what I was wanting to really show, because I was kind of fundamental in discovering before, and that's actually, I reached out and put a plea in 2013. I posted on my website, which I've had to take offline, but for certain reasons. But specifically on that website, I made a plea to scientists, please look into this stuff, please. And I'm not saying it's specifically me, but I found certain correlations with solitons, and I found I found that specifically what's happening is when we're building, and this is a totally other call, and what I should actually do is I could demonstrate in real time using the keyboard temperament. We can actually build the sounds in real time and show the public how this works. Because when you're building a music scale, there has to be certain things that makes music, right? So what is music? I consider music as the art of distraction. But specifically, in the ancient world, it was never actually intended for entertainment. It was supposed to be for spiritual upliftment, and then connecting to nature in that way. So there was certain things that were forbidden and whatnot, because they realized that the purity of certain tones. So specifically, I discovered and found out that there's these coherent and decoherent things. And it's got nothing to do with the Hans Giesing study, but I saw that if you build a scale based off of the least amount of primes, right? Like, I noticed that what 433 is a prime, right? So you've got a range. You've got a range that after prime 433, 434 to 451. And that was the range I was saying years ago. That's the wrong place, because in there, what's happening is the number ratios of which how we used then put into a fast Fourier transform to make hertz and whatnot, right? They're based off of 3 primes coming together. And I realized, well, they're not all even. So they're actually creating a decoherence. So you get this zone, you've got these like hot spots. They're kind of like sticky spots in the spectrum of where coherence, you can build coherent frequencies that are going to be beneficial. And then there's the decoherent. But it just so happens that the establishment and the Masonic establishment and all of these places of control that all support 440 and 444, they sit in that range of decoherence. They sit in that range of decoherence. So is it any wonder, therefore, with that information, because that information is extremely dangerous to the establishment. So they're going to do everything to create fake news and do blah, 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 blah. And then that's actually what happened, because online you've got all these crazy conspiracy theory stories. Right? Yeah. And that's what
we've been over some of that in previous shows.
Right, yeah. Right, exactly, right. So the job of conspiracy theory is disruption strategy. So that it astroturfs is the term. It astroturfs over true stuff coming out, because this stuff's very valuable, right? And that's the whole thing. It's not about trying to overtake something. It's about having a separate thing that you can build in order to help. So literally, this is really important news, because everything these days that you want to get help with, like holistic means and things that can take health into your own hands, is being completely destroyed and disparaged and whatever. So because this all goes back, because ultimately I'm still answering your first question, why is everyone so? It's because humanity's being farmed, and we've lost all of the connections to the ancient sites. We've lost the connections to the ancient ways and all of the things that support a true workable and loving community.
Okay, that's great, and that's a great summary. I just wanted to jump in and say I've got a question from the audience if you'd like to take a question.
Sure.
Okay, so so this is in regards to when matter changes. So I've got a friend in the chat here who's basically saying, does a brick, so something that's been broken down and reassembled as a brick, hold special properties in relation to the ley line energies, etc., mentioned on the show? So can a brick be just as relevant as, say, a stone, that might carry some level of consciousness or otherwise? Can a brick still contain something? Is it still have the capacity for, I don't know, some kind of cosmic consciousness or panpsychism, or like from your perspective, working with energy lines and things?
I think that's a great question, because, well, let's take the brick, right? The brick analogy. Well, specifically, a brick is a unit of consciousness, right? A brick at one point was a thought in somebody's head,
yep.
And then that brick became a thing when somebody took action in space and time to make that form into a brick. So essentially, yeah, the brick is a unit of consciousness of sorts. It's different than a stone, because a stone can be around for a very long time. And I noticed, okay, I'll kind of this is going to be a long way to answer this, but I'll kind of put it this way. When we're talking in a room, and we're hearing one another and stuff like that, right? That's fine. We've got sound traveling through the atmosphere, right? It's creating whatever. But specifically, what happens to sound if we make the medium more dense? So in other words, rather than talking through air, we talk underwater. Sound travels faster, doesn't it?
I'm aware of the conversation about based on the medium. Yeah, I forgive me, I'm a bit blank on that one, but yeah, I understand what you're getting at, but not what the answer is. Sorry.
Well, there's the speed of sound. And by the way, here's another thing. Everybody's locked into these like constants. All they do is to set the average mean and make that a constant.
Yep.
Right? So big G in gravity is an embarrassing fact that what they do is gravity's fluctuating all the time. What they do is they just set an average mean, call that big G. Gravity's constant.
Intellectual phase locking.
Phase locking.
Yeah, so that's the Rupert Sheldrake band interview from TED, the TED talk he did. Check that out, guys. I'll put it in the show notes if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, check that out, because that handles the dogmas. That's what I'm saying. Is like science has now become a religion. And how dare you go against the state religion, right? So specifically, the reason I'm mentioning that, right? So the denser the medium, sound for some reason speeds up. I won't get into the physics and all that stuff right now, and I don't even purport to know all the physics or whatever, because I don't care. This one thing is do each one of us in order to drive down to the store to get a loaf of bread, do we open up the engine and take the engine apart and figure out how it all works before we go buy a loaf of bread, or do we just jump in the car, turn the key, and go use it as a vehicle to get somewhere, right? So likewise, as an innovator, I don't care about all I use about how can we make things practical. So think of the speed of sound, right? If it speeds up in a denser medium, what do you think would happen when it hits something solid like a stone?
Well, I guess it would disperse, or it would wrap around it. Or
yeah, I mean, there's other things, right?
Is there
So
a gross and a fine element to it, or is it a spectrum of? If we're talking about it in a particle sense, particles hitting particles, or are we talking about it as a wave? Or
well, this is just the problem is we don't have a common ground of interpretation between things, right? So for what I just said there, I will get all kinds of science like, wow, you don't know anything what you're talking about, blah, 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 blah. But you see, it comes down to the terms and definitions, right? So it's interesting is I could say all that, or I could just say, just touch your head to a stone and meditate and see what comes to you. And talk into the stone. See what happens. And listen. Just listen.
Yeah. That's really important what you just shared there, because people need to know the how, the what, and the means of the mechanism and how all the maths and everything works. It's like, bro, just put your head against the stone and just see if it tells you anything, and then go from there, like that's the journey I've been on with Reiki as well, trying to understand how it could possibly work at all. But then it's like going, you know what?
Right.
It doesn't exclude it from, just because we don't understand the mechanism or what's happening doesn't exclude it from the scientific method, just for the people out there. And we can still observe the effects, which is a lot of what science is. It's observing the effects and I guess working backwards.
Yeah, it's just descriptors based on the art of approximation. And Alfred was it Alfred Whitehead? Was that the guy? All right, famous physicist or a big time physicist. He said, what was it? Absence of proof is not proof of absence.
Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that, right? So, because, like the brick, right? So back to that whole thing with the brick, right? The brick is a formed unit of consciousness of somebody that made a brick. But what was that guy thinking of when he made the brick? Did he make the brick? Probably made it unconscious. But if you make the brick with conscious intent while you're making the brick, a part of the unit of your consciousness is in that brick.
It's almost
And
like
then,
what they refer to as inserting psyche into matter.
well, yeah. Yeah, and this was the whole thing of cover over this stuff because, in the latter part of the 19th century, they wanted to completely dispel paranormal, activity. So the scientific godfathers at the time sent in the best of the best, Sir William Crookes, the chemist. Now, he was like a fellow of the Royal Society, and like he was like, so they sent him in to disparage and basically shut down all these paranormal claims. But it turns out that he actually proved the existence of paranormal activity. So what did they do to him? They did what they do to everybody who is an innovator or comes out with something that can upset the apple cart of authority. Is what they did was they created a scandal and completely ran him out of science, destroyed his life.
Pretty standard. It's like a long-running, organized campaign / hit job to get rid of the ones that don't fall in line when they make other discoveries, because some people have got a conscience and they decide to speak out, and that makes them unpopular. And so it's time to fucking squish them down.
Well, the system runs on money, right? So it all runs on patents, and it runs on whatever is being through these universal grants. I mean, I'm kind of digressing, but this is what we're facing with this whole thing with archaeology and stones and all of this stuff, and why this is it's being reduced to make people fear this kind of work is evil or pagan, especially. It upsets me that that you start looking into this stuff and all of a sudden you're labeled New Age just for looking at it.
I know. I talked to a guy who was a sound engineer at a job I was working at a few years back, and I just mentioned the whole 432 hertz thing, or I just told and he looks at me and he goes, "Sounds a bit new agey," and I'm like, "Bro, it's just changing the pitch of your instrument just to play around, right?" But it was just like the instant reaction.
Well, okay, so 432 hertz, right? I'll release this because I haven't talked about this and I've been holding this one for a long time. Is 432, and again, hertz is a man-made, modern, recent invention of the term hertz, right? But specifically, it's based off of pulsing something at 432 times a second. But we keep trying to make that second more and more precise by measuring it locking it into measurements of the atoms and stuff, right? So it was like before it was the cesium atom, and then I had predicted that we're going to change the SI units, remember? And then sure enough they did, which throws the data sets off. But specifically, so they're now measuring on the strontium, right? So specifically, that's fine and dandy, but there was an ancient metric, of light and time and measurement, and that loosely worked its way into a loose kind of arbitrary second. And how the ancients did that was they would take two sticks, and then with a plumb line, with a line, as that would be going. And you can find this information in the book Uriel's Machine. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. So this ancient metric, and you can look up ancient metrology as well. So what they used to do was they would time the space it would take from one star, from one stick through the line to the other, and they'd swing a pendulum and count it that way. So we basically had a loose ancient second, and we had a loose ancient grid system. And like I said, I wish I had my book out with that, because I was going to put all that stuff in that book around the ancient Beaker clans and the ancient druids. They had these plates, and actually I have it actually on a picture here. Let's see, I'll take that plate up. Where is it? Right here. You see this? You see this kind of gold plate in the middle of this?
Yeah, cool.
Let's just make this big. This is an exact dimension of the Great Pyramid.
Wow. But
what this is like an ancient supercomputer. And the angles of this represent angles of light rays. And And this is the 432 dimensions worked into this 4.32 inches. And again, these are arbiters of scale, right? So basically, what I taking that information and going further, because I was researching this. This is called the barrel lozenge years ago. I realized that this shape was it was many things. It worked into things, and so what happened is I kind of discovered that the angles of light rays, you could actually find out which clan was from where because of the angle of these plates, because it lined up to an ancient meteorological, basically GPS system. And I just threw that out there, and I'm going to go, wow, how do you prove that? Blah, blah, right? So it would take me too long to go into that. But yeah, I had a whole friggin' 2 chapters that was dedicated to that, and actually went to England to take a picture of this, only to discover that they had taken the original and then made a replica of it. I was like, okay. So I can't actually get in and photograph it in more detail. But anyway, I just want to share that there was an ancient way of being able to actually grid. And so when you take grid arc minutes, you start to see the reciprocal light and all these kind of things worked in the square root of light, which is around 432. Again, is this whole thing of like wanting I give an accurate number, but that doesn't make any difference, because every so often what they do is they switch the data sets and fudge the numbers. So yeah, there's important reasons why all this ancient, mathematics and all these ancient numbers were there for a reason, because I really actually believe that this was ways that we could commune with the earth and talk to the prime creator or prime field that we're all connected to. And that's what's missing today. What's missing is to pilgrimages to these places, to just go and sit in silence, because you have to sit in.
Right. Yeah. Just right there, what you just said, man. There's a place, that you go to when you sit under a tree and you're not distracted. There might be a bunch of different places, but I guess this alludes to a question, if I may, and that is, what we've talked about for the last sort of hour and 10, I think it is we're talking about, quite a large topic here and sort of just scraping the surface of it. But it comes back to my initial question about initiation and about how, going to these sites changes you. Yeah. And how it can awaken things. And I've noticed this in my Reiki practice too. Some people have what I would refer to as initiatory experiences that leave them with questions and something to follow. Pretty much like the name of the podcast, Thread to Threshold. A little thread pops up that's interesting, and you follow it, and you follow it as far as you will, to the point whether or not you're ready to make a decision about adopting something into your belief system or recognizing it as being hardcore fact that you can take as being solid knowing, like a gnosis. But when you take it within you. But as far as these standing stones go, I'm guessing that the ancients realized the importance of using rites and rites of passages, and that the importance of, I don't want to say ascension, I want to say something more along the lines of a developed level of awareness, from going from being sort of like, primitive man and moving more into the cerebro-spiritual. It's almost like a threshold that's crossed when you go to, the idea would be to have the initiation because you now have the capacity as a young child. You've done all the fun running around stuff, and now it's time for you to learn things and become more aware of your environment. I don't know, like, I'm guessing you can pick up what I'm saying. Like, one of the main purposes of these stones, and I think a lot of spiritual practices, is to help elevate the awareness of mankind.
Well, I mean, they created the institution of church from the ancient standing stones. I mean, the original name of church was Kirk, and that Kirk goes back and could be a loose translation of an older term that meant it was a conclave or circle. So the ancient standing stone circles were the original churches. They were the original places of gathering, and you know, certain circles had certain functions, and others there was ones that were specifically made for only observing the moon. And specifically the 18-year lunar standstill cycle. And up in the north of Scotland, there's a few places up there that were way off the beaten path. And so they would have to haul supplies in. And the reasons why that they're up there is because they can only actually, you know, chart these things at that latitude. So you've got willful construction of these places for specific means, just like I opened with Chichen Itza is the one of the only ones down there that's aligned to the equinox. So it's an equinox pyramid, right? So yeah, you know, the ancients went to great lengths. So you know why we will always wonder why, but the whole thing is, like I said, is let's not worry about that. Let's just look at it and imitate it and start, you know, doing the stuff now. And then for the past few years, is what I've been doing is privately is been building small circles that are around different locations, different countries that are aligned. And I learned how to do all this is by spending times at the big megaliths and spending time with those stones in silence, and you know, listening to the guardians. And so you've got to approach these. You can't just waltz in. You got to approach this with ultimate humbleness and reverence, and ask permission. You know, I was at a stone site a few weeks ago doing stuff, and I deliberately went out there just for that purpose, you know, to because all the stuff that's going on. I think we need help. We need help from the guardians. We need help from the ancient ancestors. We need help from the celestial realms. And if everybody's, you know, on phones doing this, and you know, people are checking out and watching The Bachelor Monday nights, you know, who's talking to the ancients, right? So I might as well do that, and some other people will do that, whatever. And the more times that we can actually connect to our ancient past and use the stones as telephones, right? Because there's a symbiotic connection between us, because we have minerals and quartz in our body, right? What do we use quartz for, right? Quartz is known as for communication, right? Because of the crystallosyllatus, the structure of it, right? Which is really interesting, you know, and right? So we use it in cell phones, whatever. So we actually have communication in our bones. And so our bones are our stones. But then the stones of the earth are the bones of the earth. So there's a connection. There's no other kind of simple way of putting it, you know. So when you're able to, you know, bring in great humbleness and honor for these places, that you're in a sacred place, then that's a key. Now, here's something else. You go through initiations. You literally go through initiations. Now, I've had stuff where there's like, I'll try to get to a stone. I just can't find it. There's a time in Ireland, I was trying to get to this one place. It was like 4,000 years old, this place. And I'm walking by this place all the time. I can't find it. I'm there for months looking, trying to walk past this place. And finally I went into a pub, and I was sitting with the locals, and when I got in friendly with the locals, because they don't warm up to a stranger, right? Not easily, especially in Northern Ireland. But you know, and then they say, "Oh yeah, it's like it's right there." So as soon as they say it's right there, the freaking thing appeared. And then I see it all the time. It's not just that I'm an astute guy. I'm very hyper vigilant, and I really can pay attention to the landscape. And that's just one-off. I mean, there's many stories I've seen, things that boggle the mind. I've taken photographs at stones of weird energy trails that I haven't went fully public with that yet, because there's some stuff I want to get lined up in a row. But when I do, that's going to be something, because you can catch these subtle energy fields. And I think that's what it's about. I think that's these lines that we have, these telluric lines. We'll just call them ley lines, because everybody knows that's what they call them in the New Age movements and stuff. So these lines, when you connect your consciousness and your focus and intent, then what you're actually doing is you're connecting to everyone else throughout history that has connected to those stones. And that's the difference between ancient stones and the brick.
Right. And so just on the topic of the brick, because, you know, we're covering a bit of territory here. So essentially, like if I said to you that a chap had found a brick and he had felt called to work with this brick somehow, it may be a, you know, it could be, you know, what if it's about the person who created the brick? Or maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it's to do with a compound that was included in the brick. I mean, it's quite a, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that the person in the chat that mentioned it is kind of saying, you know, how do they work with a brick? And, you know, they've got their own methodology. But for example, if you BTC got asked to work with a brick, if somebody came up and said, hey man, this brick, it's trying to tell me something or something like that, you know, you wouldn't dismiss that.
No, not at all, because right, this is going to be the hardest thing, because this is going to require a paradigm shift of perception. But the new quantum models that are coming out is showing that we're basically in a virtual reality, like a video game of sorts. And so everything that you're experiencing as the world is actually the past. It's your constructive mind is constructing it. So, and that also includes your five senses. So your entire whole physical experience of the world is actually in your consciousness. It's not out of your consciousness. Everything's in your conscious field. It's not separate, right? This is the flaw of materialistic science, was they observe something and then take the observer out of the equation, and then say that's not part, the observation is not part of it, but they rely on the observation of the material scientific method.
Yeah, that's a funny one, eh? Like, you know, we can't trust the human senses, but we might, you know, we use a collective consensus of human senses to sort of create what we call objective, you know, facts, or, you know, what's
intellectual phase blocking.
Yeah. And just, you know, we're coming to the top of the 90 minutes here. And I just want to say to anyone out in the audience there, if anyone out there's got any more questions for Brian, we'll probably start wrapping it up shortly.
I'm sorry I was not more concise. I've got so much to say, and I haven't really said anything
yet. No. Well, you know, yeah. I mean, let's do this again. I mean,
sure.
You know, but yeah, 90 minutes is
yeah,
pretty
absolutely.
good. I mean, we could go on for a little bit, but I have to say,
no, 90 minutes good.
Got something really burning to share on the topic. Let's plan to do another one, maybe.
Yeah, let's do another one, because I mean, what's really, you can make these sites. You don't. So here's the other thing: you don't need to go all the way and fly all the way over to this big megalith and blah blah blah. It's been there for thousands of years. You can make your own. The whole thing is that if you find a place, if you know how to dowse, I use a camera meter. Had this for years. This is my go-to. I've used this all over the world, this one.
Oh, this thing's interesting. Hang on, I'll just put this on the screen. Hang on.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right. So this is what I use to find subtle energy fields and whatever. And of course, is absolutely material science. They call this pseudoscience. Well, fine. Good for them. Yeah. Right. They can go look over there. Right. So you can actually get amazing results finding these currents. I've got field runs as well, but specifically what you can do is you can dowse where the right spot is. If you're well seasoned, you know, like for example, I don't need this. This is just a symbol to show somebody else that something else is happening. Because I know how to read the landscape and find it. It's just part of my gift, right? But what you do is you find where you try to find where these lines are that are good. So what you don't want to find is what's called as a curry line, because a curry line is bad for health. So like heart lines are, these are usually spaced out every couple of meters or something. What's very important to understand is these subtle energy fields. During the day, the telluric currents flow south, and then at night,
in the northern hemisphere, or is that globally?
It's so it will flow from the northern hemisphere to the southern during the day. Now, there's if you think of it, it's like a figure eight, right, going on, which is that it represents the heart space field, right? This what do you call it? This field here, right?
Yeah.
That the heart generates. So anyway, specifically, and then at night, the telluric field it rushes north. So it's interesting. There's a lot of sites in the north that were aligned to the winter solstice, especially Irish round towers and stuff, where specifically they're tuned to actually take in a specific part of the cosmos at the winter solstice, the frequency and stuff. And again, as I could go a lot more, but the whole thing is what you can do is you don't need these large stones. You can take stones. First off, don't just grab stones. Stones must pick you. You don't pick stones. That's very important, because if you let your ego, like, oh, there's a nice shiny stone, and you take that, you might get bad luck. And I've noticed that. I remember there was a woman. She went and she got one of these stones from Hawaii, and she was having all kinds of problems. And then she says, well, I picked this stone up. And I said, where'd you get this? Hawaii. I said, oh my God, you got to get rid of that now. And there's cases of, stones from Hawaii. You take the stone out of Hawaii, you get terrible bad luck. So she nailed it back. She nailed the stone back, and then, all of the problems went away. So
Stephen and Evan mentioned this on their last show as well, is that, some rocks will kill you, not by falling on you, just being in their possession. And they go into that in quite a bit of detail, but it's interesting to hear you mention that too, because I've heard this from other people as well. Basically, you're just going, oh, shiny, and you're not going, you know what? Maybe that rock actually wants to be there. Maybe it doesn't want to be picked up. That can be a bridge too far for some people, but
Yeah, I understand that, but look, it's like, then if it's a bridge too far, is like, then you may understand that somebody that goes around collecting stones because they're drawn to collect stones, and their house is full of stones, and then they don't understand why they're riddled with arthritis and chronic health problems and fatigue and fibromyalgia like conditions and all kinds of stuff. And it's like well, it's like mixing all these energies together, right? And it's like anyway. It's kind of the same deal. Is you gotta let, when you're taking stones to create a sacred space, a sacred stone circle, you've got to let the stone pick you, not the other way around.
Awesome, great advice.
So leave it there. Maybe on another call I could actually go into, and I'll show pictures of stone circles and actually how to do it. Or whatever.
Wow, that would be amazing. I mean, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people interested in that, because these are the times when getting back to our ancient roots, to our ancestors, to our stories, our myths, because we have become so disconnected. And I mentioned Reiki a bit, which is a Japanese tradition essentially, but the core teaching of it is to reconnect with the earth. That's the first thing you do as a Reiki practitioner, is you learn to reconnect to the ground. Because and I think, as for people who are awakening at the moment and are, it might be anything. It might be ancient civilizations that got them into greater awareness, or showing an interest in the greater reality. It might be UFOs, it might be spiritual teachings and stuff, but it's one thing to have your head in the clouds, but you still got to have your feet on the ground. And so finding practices that are spiritual, but that also ground us as well, because we can get too top heavy, I think. And
completely. Yeah.
And so things that keep us linked, we're here to form the link between heaven and earth, But anyway, Brian, I just want to give you this opportunity to do a shameless plug on yourself and where people can get in touch with you and any services that you offer, events coming up, anything of that nature.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I do sound design as well. So like if somebody's got like some entrepreneurial stuff they're doing, they need music for their videos or whatever. Yeah, I do that off my website, briantcollins.com. I also, what I do is I do something very, very unique and very special is I offer a live stream. It's a high definition live stream where I have a very special instrument that I had created for this. It allows, it calms the nervous system in under 8 minutes. I've had it tested by a bioscanner. It's really amazing. And so it's great for releasing stress and anxiety and fear. And given the amount of fear that's going on now in the world, this is a crucial service. And so what I do is I work with somebody one-on-one to find out what it is, the issue. And then I stream the service. We work together, and just like the intent is, we work on the intent on letting that go. And then I record it, and then you've got it that you can listen it back. And then, people are using this to, solve all kinds of issues in their life, relationships, money, you name it.
That's really cool. We have talked about this. I think we've even done a show slightly on it, one of the earlier shows, but you're absolutely right. And there's never been a better time to, if you've tried everything else and, people are looking for things that they can help them, that they don't have to leave the house for as well. So, this is something I would encourage people to check out at Brian's website, briantcollins.com.
And I appreciate that, but also just want to let you know is that I don't just offer this to anybody, because you have to be bold and committed and willing to face yourself, because to empty your cup, it means you got to look at your own inner shadow. And most people don't want to do that. They want to just be healed by somebody or saved. And I'm not here to do that. I'm here to help committed people who really actually want to do the work and empty out their stuff and look at their own shadow and empty that out. And when you do that, oh my God, it really is incredible. And I've seen miracles happen in a short amount of time. And in that is, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but specifically, it's amazing. That's all I can say. I work with animals, by the way, and I put a lot of research into this, and I volunteered with animals because animals have no ego. And I just saw how effective animals were healing from trauma and post-traumatic stress, and rescue animals and stuff. So then I decided, because ultimately I got that to help myself, and then started helping others with it. And oh my God, it's so needed at this time. That's all I can say.
So what section of your website is that particular service where people can get more information from? Is there a page on your website?
I've taken the page down because I'm getting some bad, I got to be frank. There's I've been under severe trolling attack for years, and just trying to close this information down. So the other thing is that, like I said, it's not for everybody. I've got to find out whether or not we're in a good fit to work together. So just reach out, contact me, right? And then I can send you through a questionnaire. And if you just answer honestly on the questionnaire, see if we're a good fit. But I can tell you absolutely. I mean, I once I do that, then I send somebody to the page where they can get all the information. Right?
Perfect.
And you can read it that way. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's great. So what I'm going to do now is we'll call it here, and it sounds like we've already got something building for another presentation online. And I just want to say a huge thank you, because I know you put a lot of time into putting those slides together to help illustrate and elaborate and help people conceptualize through the visual imagery that you've provided, which is great because you've got some really important information to share. And verbal is going to work great for some people, but some people are going to need those images. So I'm very grateful, brother, for you putting that time aside to
Cheers. Yeah.
That's a real that's how you do it. You know what I'm saying? So if I get you just to stick around for two seconds just after I close the broadcast off, but I just want to say a big thank you, brother Brian T. Collins, for coming on Thread Threshold today and sharing your huge wealth of wisdom, experience, knowledge, understanding, gnosis. Man, you got so much to share, brother. I'm so glad that you're available to the public, even through this presentation. So thank you so much.
I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me on, Phil, and I'd love to be on again sometime.
Awesome. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's always great to catch up with Brian. The man has got, such a wealth of knowledge, like I keep saying. It's the truth, though. And I just wanted to also say, if you really enjoyed this podcast and you want to, if you want to show a way to support it, you can send me an email to say, thanks, Phil. I really like what you're up to. Or you can also make a donation, a monetary donation via PayPal, which I've got the Thread to Threshold details there. You can use PayPal. There'll be other options in the show notes below as well. But I just wanted to finish this off by let's seal up the ritual here. If I get you to put your hands together like this, just a bit away from your body, just under your nose, just a bit away. Don't lean them on your body. Close your eyes and take a few deep breaths with me. Breathing in through the nose, holding it, and out. In, hold it, and out. Last one, breathing in, hold it, and release. And like I said, that precept that I announced at the beginning, just for today, be true to yourself and true to your way. Authenticity is such a wonderful characteristic, attribute, something to display. It takes courage. Do it. Why not? Thank you so much for listening in. My name is Phil Rice. You've been checking out Thread to Threshold with myself, Phil Rice, and Brian T. Collins. You're so wonderful. I love you. Be strong out there. We'll talk again soon. And yeah, we'll probably see you tomorrow with the Steve 7 interview. All right. See you later, everyone. Bye.